Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know that this is part 2 of our 2-part episode on scary 90s media. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, definitely check that out. And if you're on the YouTube channel, you can definitely click the link in the description below to get to that episode. But if you've already listened to that, on to the new one.
Twice the terror.
So, a book series that I want to talk about that is probably one of the most notorious book series of all time, but one of the most influential books, franchises of all time for millennials is, of course, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Girl, I gotta go get mine.
Yeah, grab them, please. They are some of the greatest horror anthology books that you can get. I have these copies here, which I'm showing on, if you're an audio listener, I'm showing on camera, which are the paperback versions. But I also have a hardback anthology version of all 3 books together back there.
I had the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series. I had all 3 books in one.
That's what I have, yeah.
And it was so popular, it was so big that when I was in elementary school back in, the 90s, we had a librarian who was like, I really wanted to get these for the school, but they wouldn't let me buy the book, I think. She was like, just couldn't get access to it. And I was like, well, I got it. So I brought it in, and like I was like the coolest kid at that. It was the only time I was the cool kid. But I brought that book in, and oh my God.
I mean, I love these books today, but I would be like, I don't think it would be a stretch to say they are both, as a kid, they are both some of the most fun things to read and the most terrifying things to read. Like, as a kid, we talk about things that are like scary to kids and stuff, and like, Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's like safe but scary. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is borderline surreal horror at its best. Like, yeah. It is truly one of those things where I've heard this from multiple people. It's that thing where you're like almost afraid to turn the page because you don't know what the next drawing is going to be. And that's the thing. So these books, technically, I mean, we're not really bending the rules. We're talking about things that we grew up with. They are more 80s books. The first one came out in 1981. The second was 1984. And the third was 1991. But I never think of them as 80s books because they were so popular when we were growing up.
Yeah.
They're written by Alvin Schwartz. And for anybody who's not familiar with Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, basically a lot of the stories are based on old urban legends or folklore, and he did a ton of research. That's why the books are so spaced apart, because he took the time to really research the stories that he was like recreating. And the stories are written very simply. Like, they're not... let's see if I can find like a good page. Well, not really, but like they're not really written, with like a ton of like difficult words or small print or anything. Like, they're easy reads, they're meant for kids. But he took them very seriously and like wanted to make sure they were the best. So much so that there's like resources in the back that tell you like this story is based on this. And yeah, I found this folklore from this culture or that sort of thing, which is also great. They're so effective. They're so simple. I mean, some of them are like stuff like, of course, like the Lover's Lane, Man with the Hook for a Hand, or High Beams, where there's somebody, they're flashing the beams because there's somebody in the back of their car or whatever, like that sort of stuff.
My mom, I'm sorry to
You're okay.
The one that I remember reading, and I talked to my mom about it, was like an old urban legend from the 70s. And it was the one where the girl buys the prom dress and she goes to prom and she dies because apparently the dress was taken off of a corpse and the formaldehyde in the dress soaked into her and it killed her, which also that is never going to happen to you.
No.
But I was like, Mom, what is this? And she's just like, oh yeah, we've known about that for years. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, and I remember, I feel bad for, I've talked to my mom about this. I don't want to throw my mom under the bus, but like she was kind of horrified when she saw me like reading these. Like I remember her being like upset by some of the things because, again, for anybody who doesn't know, it's not the stories that are scary, although they are very effective and very well written and very creepy and fun.
It's the
artwork. Stephen Gamble is one of the most influential artists to people like us. Yes, like his style is something that I absorbed and will draw, and not in his style, but like definitely it has influenced the way I draw things and a lot of artists. I have a deck of tarot cards that are in his style, somebody did, that are really, really cool. He has I can pull up, let me see if I can find a good one here, and I can show it on
find
camera.
the one of the remember the woman with like the stringy hair that was in her face.
Yeah, that is what is the name of that story? Is it Ghost in the House? Let's see if I can find it.
Also, I was able to find, I don't know if anyone had this one, but this is a good R.L. Stine book that had a lot of scary stories for kids in it. I don't remember when my dad got me this, but this one's a little bit more modern. I think this one came out in like the 2000s-ish era. This is 2002, but this one had a lot of really good stories in it too. So
that's awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I recommend, like, truly, like, for anybody looking to read something fun, read some R.L. Stine stuff. Like, he's a simple writer, and I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, I think a lot of people hear simple and they think that's bad, but like, he has said that he writes based on, like, he'll come up with a story title and that's how he writes the story, which a lot of people work the opposite way. But for him, he's like, I write it, I create an outline, and then I just use my outline and I write the story. And it's like, some people are like, well, that's not an artistic, creative way to do that. And it's like, dude is like back in the heyday was writing a book a month. Like, that is okay. Sometimes it's okay to like break things down like that. Like, take that as a lesson for creative people out there, because sometimes it's okay to work that way. Like, you don't have to have a muse all the time to be creative. Sometimes it just takes something simple and being like, all right, let me break down an outline and do this, and maybe I can write something. Now, for anybody out there who, you can just look up Stephen Gamble art, and you'll see typically his stuff from Scary Story pops up first. But it is called The Haunted House. I know which one you're talking about, and it's this one right here.
That is like...
This is in a kid's book. Like, for anybody wondering, that is, and I love it. Yeah. Like, and I've tried to work in, nobody quite, he was a very like kind of private guy, and there's not a lot known about like what medium he used for his art. The most common ones you see that he used probably are graphite powder, charcoal, ink, and or watercolors. Like, those are the ones he kind of used the most. And I have graphite powder at my art station over here. Like, I've tried to like mess with that medium and stuff. And it's like, it gives you this very cool, floaty, foggy look. And that's why his artwork is so darn effective. I mean, any one of these, the fact that these are in, again, a book, collection of like folklore and stuff for kids, and any one of these I would be happy to hang in my house. Like, I'm trying to find some of the other good ones.
Yeah,
like,
I'm going to look up Harold, because Harold was the one.
Harold is great. I mean, High Beams here gives you a good example of kind of that floatiness I was talking about, kind of that fogginess. And these are obviously on my like low-res webcam, so please look these images up for anybody who's curious.
If you can, look up Harold from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, because that was the story that absolutely broke me.
Yeah, which book is Harold in? I'm trying to remember which one he is part of, because I know the third book is where he really starts going.
Oh, like, he is in the third one. Yeah,
Harold's in the third one. Okay, let me see. Yeah, Harold, like, the third book is where he really just kind of like starts going even more out there with some of his drawings. Yeah. he gets very surreal with some of them, like with things that don't even make sense. Like there's one called like, oh yeah, here's Harold. Put that up there for
No.
anybody.
That no. Okay, it reminded me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
In the beginning in the cemetery when they have that corpse.
The body, yeah, the corpse on the
Yeah.
like
He's
here.
like-
I mean, his artwork is just so haunting and beautiful. Like look at this. This is
look at this.
like,
Yeah.
and I mean that in a good way. Like, look at that. That is for a story called The Dead Hand. Like, it's not even like, it's just this bizarre imagery that just works so beautifully with these stories. This is called The Dream, and it's not like a super scary story or anything. I think it's actually kind of like if I remember, it's like more of like a positive story. But it's a very famous piece of artwork.
Yes.
And it's this one.
Oh, that was she upsets me.
Yeah, it's like, and like from what I could find, it's not like Stephen Gamble. You know, some artists kind of feel like they have to get in like a certain headspace when they're like making darker artwork or stuff. And from what I could find, Stephen Gamble was just like, I had a lot of fun making those. Like he just enjoyed working in the medium, and he wasn't out there setting out to like, because he was a children's book illustrator. Like he's done stuff that's not scary stories. Like, but he just had fun with like making this weird surreal art, and it works so beautifully in those books.
It's good sometimes to step outside of the norm and do something a little strange, a little dark, a little different.
Yeah.
And like I love that he had a good time doing it, because I had a
Yeah.
good time, getting scared by it.
You know how many people have his artwork like tattooed on them, or like,
I'm this close. I'm not kidding. I'm this close.
Yeah. It's so beautiful and haunting and weird, and it fits the stories. And like I said, when you're a kid, you're reading this stuff at night, and you're like sitting there with the book, and like, you're flipping through the pages, and like you're waiting. You're like, what's the next story? What's the next thing? What's the next, and some of the stories are darker, like, and weird. Like there's the story of the big toe, which is the one where the kid finds a toe growing in the ground, and there's like a ghost coming after them. Like, where's my big toe?
Big toe. Yeah, that one's silly and like a little bit funnier. And then you have the one where the kids are playing hide and seek, and the one hides in the trunk up in the attic, and then
Yeah.
they can go anywhere from really silly to really scary.
And like I remember these stories, and definitely remember the imagery. And like I don't want to take anything away from Alvin Schwartz, because he's a great writer, and he's great at
Fantastic.
distilling these down, and making them simple for anybody to read, but especially kids. But it really is the combo of his writing and his research and his development of these stories, these classic stories, and the bizarre, surreal, amazing, gorgeous artwork of Stephen Gamble that brings these books to life. I mean, they were so popular in our library. Yeah, they were so popular in our library of my elementary school that like it was hard to get them. Like it was so hard to like check them out, because they were always checked out. With as effective as those books are, and amazing and gorgeous as the artwork is, and as creepy as they are, there is a reason that parents hated them, and it was that parents, at least when we were growing up, a lot of parents, and you know what, still today, there's a lot of people out there, parents or not, who think that this stuff is like, bad for kids or evil for kids. And it always takes some new form, right? It's heavy metal music is dangerous. Horror movies are dangerous. Video games are dangerous. Like, and nobody can really back that up with like true evidence. And these books are the same thing. I talked about earlier how Goosebumps was the 15th most challenged book between 1990 and 1999. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, all three of them, was the #1 most challenged book for that decade. And even into the 2000s, from 2000 to 2010, it was the 7th most challenged book.
We could probably probably include the fact that I grew up in a really Catholic town, and that this is part of the reason why we couldn't have these things. We could probably have a whole episode on the Satanic Panic. And all of that. So these books are easily challenged by parents.
Yeah. And here's the thing. And we talk about, this episode originally, the idea was comparing like media we grew up with to media now and stuff like that. And like we've kind of just talked about the media we grew up with, which is awesome because I think a lot of people maybe don't know this stuff who are younger than us or things like that. But like this is a good example of proven element of you wouldn't do this in today's media, because in 2011 HarperCollins, the publishers, re-released the book for the 30th anniversary. And they changed the artwork. They hired an artist named Brett Hellquist. I can never remember. He is a great artist. He's probably most famously known for the series of Unfortunate Events books. And he is
like, to have to follow that. I mean...
Yeah, that's the thing. He's a fantastic artist. But like, here, actually, I don't know if have you seen that version of the book?
Yeah, I can see them. And like, so for example, there's a story where a spider bites her and it lays eggs under her skin, which is, again, the original image is mortifying. But you look at the one done by Brett Hellquist, and it's just a spider on the girl's face. Like, it doesn't really tap into...
Yeah. Or the haunted house, the one we were just talking about with like the really like...
Yeah.
The thing about that image is it's almost like she's staring out at you from the page. And his version is like this guy, and like it's kind of like the skeletal like woman looking at him, but like there's no detail in it in terms of like that weird surrealist nature of it.
She's like a wispy robe. Like, it looks Victorian. Yeah. It looks like it's antiquated now, and it doesn't really tap in the same.
Look up his version of Harold if you can. It is such a far cry from, and again, I don't want to talk negative on his artwork, because his artwork is beautiful. It's very well done. It's just that this artwork is so iconic, but it is one of the things that was always so challenged. And so apparently this company, HarperCollins, thought it was a good idea to change the artwork, probably because they didn't want the press. And all it did was make people mad. Like, and so in 2017, they re-released it with the original artwork, thank goodness. But for very long time, I mean, that's what, 2011 to 2017. So 6 years, these were out of print. Like, you couldn't get these versions of them without or that's why as soon as I found that out, I special ordered that anthology version, because I didn't want to lose this artwork forever. And it's so important to have stuff like this. I mean, again, if your kid likes scary stuff, but this image is too intense for them, like, get the other ones. Get the Brett Hellquist ones if they want scary stories, but like they don't want to be too scared. I understand that. But to get rid of the old artwork completely and be like, these are your new versions, enjoy, is just absolutely wrong. It is the wrong way to do it. And even if they didn't intend it this way, it's a weird form of censorship. You know what I mean? Like, they maybe didn't intend it to be that. Maybe they were just like, look, new artwork, for a new generation, and we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of these stories, and it's great. But they didn't understand that that artwork makes such a massive impact on those stories. And the minute you take that away, it changes them. Here's the thing. Obviously, these books made such an impact, they turned it into a movie in 2019. Oh, yeah. Directed by Andre Overall, I believe is how you pronounce it. He's the same guy that directed Troll Hunter and Autopsy of Jane Doe and like a bunch of stuff. And it was produced by Guillermo del Toro. And it was, I know some people didn't like it as much as I did. Other than a few little minor like problems I had with it, I thought it was a really fun movie. Like, it's a really good, fun Halloween movie. And it's a PG-13 horror movie, but it strikes that tone perfectly of being like faithful to the artwork and the stories, being its own thing, being scary, but not being so scary you couldn't take a younger audience member to it. Exactly what these books were meant to do. Provide a safe space for kids to be scared. And I think when a lot of these parents challenge that, that's why they didn't understand that like kids like being scared. Like, kids enjoy that fear a little bit. And like I said, I'm not going to like say I didn't flip to a page and be like, what am I looking at? This is getting under my skin, or it's weird. But like, I wouldn't change that like at all. Growing up, that was so important.
I also think it's kind of funny that millennials are considered like the softer generations, where we're so sensitive and we're like, give us back our Harold. Like, we want to see this nasty woman with spiders crawling out of an oozing gash in the middle of her face. Like, that's what we want.
Yeah.
But no, we were considered too sensitive for that. And it's like, well, who do you think was the ones who told us that we couldn't have this stuff? Like, who do you think are the ones who said that we couldn't handle it? Boomers are the softies.
And that's the thing. I think I'm glad that these books exist in the form as they originally were now, that you can go online, you can buy them, be horrified, and be, enjoy the stories, have fun with it. Like, and that is an important thing to like kind of continue, because I don't think stuff like that, maybe I'm totally wrong, but like I feel like you're seeing that less and less. Like I said, you do have some of these shows and books and movies that are kind of like trying to push the boundaries a little bit again, like Gravity Falls, or like shows that have some more horrific elements to them without being like completely scarring or things like that. But I don't think I don't know, and tell me if anybody out there works for a publisher or something, tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think these would come out in today's day and age. Like I just don't think you'd get these. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Something like that, I definitely feel like if it were going to come out, it would be marketed as either young adult or adult fiction. I don't think that they would allow that in the kids section. I just think that I don't think that the kids are soft. I think that there are people from an older era who still are trying to dictate what can or cannot be in media. And again, like you said earlier, that it's interesting. It's good to see now people our age coming in and creating the media, but I still feel like there's these old heads still in the industries that are still trying to control what can or can't. It's censorship. It is at the end of the day, it is censorship.
And again, we're not trying to get like political or anything, so I hope nobody's like upset, but like it is this weird era where like people are still trying to like ban books and like censor things, and like now major corporate, that's the thing, like we're at this point now where corporations are so big that they don't want to take risks.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. It's less about like politics, and it's more about corporations being more concerned about their bottom dollar.
It definitely does feel like you're not finding this stuff as much. There's not as many of those risks being taken with like weird bold stories. It's kind of like after SpongeBob and Harry Potter came out, everything wanted to be SpongeBob or Harry Potter. And not to say that's exactly, but it was like, okay, for books, you want young adult books that have some sort of like supernatural element or something, and it's aimed at them. For cartoons, it's like you want it to be goofy and fun, but like safe enough and not like taking. And I love SpongeBob. Don't get me wrong. Like those first 3 seasons are brilliant and hilarious and stuff. They're still really good. I mean, I quote them all the time with like weird random stuff. But like it is that thing of like it blew up so much. Like even looking back, Rugrats blew up and was a big thing, but Nickelodeon still was willing to take risks with other shows. It wasn't just Rugrats. It wasn't like Rugrats was the be all end all, because you had shows like live action stuff like All That, which then became like the Good Burger movie and like stuff like that. You know what I mean? So like they were branching out into other ways. But once SpongeBob hit, and I think Dora the Explorer for the younger audiences, that's when Nickelodeon and like these channels, same with Cartoon Network, just became about what can we market? What's going to sell? What's going to be big?
These CEOs and these producers they're not listening. They're not allowing people to be creative, or they're not listening to the voices of creative people, because all they're trying to do is just recreate their last cash cow.
Yeah.
And that's it. They're constantly chasing the same dollar that they got from this last thing, so they're just going to keep recreating it ad nauseum, so they can just keep raking in the money. And it's
well, and we also live in an era of streaming, right? So like we live in this weird era where networks aren't willing to take risks, so all they do is rerun the same shows over and over and over ad nauseum. There's no reason to create like an interesting TV block like Fox Kids or Snick, or things where it's like weird random, shows next to, like, Snick used to be like, you had, maybe you had an episode of Clarissa Explains It All, and then you had like Alex Mack or something, and then you either had All That or Roundhouse, or you put a cartoon in there, like you put Ren and Stimpy, and then you had Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like, their goal with that block was to not have any shows be the same. And it's the same with, like, like I said, like Fox Kids or Cartoon Fridays, where it was just like a block of different shows and stuff. And you also had events, like you had big like Halloween events, where it was like, this is when you're showing all your scary shows, or you're doing like contests, or you're doing things like that. Or you had on Cartoon Network, they one year did the Scooby-Doo Project, which was the Blair Witch parody that was like broken up into segments that you had to watch.
That was
like,
really
it was
fun.
so cool. And now it's like, okay, Cartoon Network, no one's watching anything, so we're going to do 12 hours of Teen Titans Go, or like Nickelodeon's like 12 hours of SpongeBob, or whatever, And streaming, it's the opposite problem, which is like you have these creators coming in, and it is kind of like you can create whatever you want. But if it does not meet standards right away, Netflix is not willing to take a risk on it, or whatever streaming service. And they're like, all right, it's canceled. It's gone after a season. Glad you invested time into it, and you don't have that time to build an audience anymore, or get your audience. And we're not even just talking about kids media in general, just media in general. You don't have time to like build your audience with the show. A show like Rugrats, or a show like Seinfeld, or a show like that, they were not major hits their first few seasons. They did well, but it's really like it same thing that happened with Goosebumps, like we were talking about.
It needs time, because people need to find the thing.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it also like it takes this like sometimes cult followings. Like, I don't think a lot of these producers and things like that realize that cult is good. This underground thing, it's iconic. It lives on forever. Right. And it doesn't make you a lot of money now, but over time, yes.
I mean, how many retro Nickelodeon shirts do you see out? I have a couple. Like, I have stuff that's like, or even like I'm wearing my X-Files shirt today. Like, like how many retro things like that do you see that like you can still market that stuff? I mean, and X-Files is a whole other thing we can talk about too, which is how influential that was in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder if we are the last generation to experience media nostalgia. I think people will always have nostalgia. People long for simpler times. They want to look back and be like, I remember growing up. I remember this. I remember this. Nostalgia can be a good thing. It can be, if not handled well, nostalgia can be dangerous, because you don't want to just live in the past. Yeah. But like, as an adult, I do love nostalgia, because it allows me to like look at the things that influenced me and made me who I am today, and be like, this is why this is important to me, and why I like collecting movies or collecting old Nickelodeon stuff, or you know what I mean? Because it made me who I am, and I wouldn't be who I am without some of that influence.
We talk about the difference between Disney kids, Cartoon Network kids, and Nickelodeon kids. Like, if you're a Nickelodeon kid, you're funny. Like, you are a funny kid. If you're a Disney kid, you're popular. Like, you are run-of-the-mill, standard. Like, nothing wrong with that. But, like, you're more like you kind of got your shit together. Mm-hmm. And then you got the Cartoon Network kids, who are absolutely the weirdos.
The ones bouncing off the walls, who are just, like, everywhere and stuff. That's kind of the, like, Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I liked all of them. I mean, I would jump between all. If I had to pick one, Nickelodeon was my channel. Like, that was what meant the most to me. But I loved Cartoon Network as well. Like, you cannot. Speaking of weird media, I mean, again, a show like Courage the Cowardly Dog.
That show is so fantastic, and like there's episodes from that show that I quote still today.
Yeah. I remember, maybe this is getting too deep, but I remember in college, stumbling upon what I think is still one of the creepiest things, and I think it's because the older you get, you start to have more existential dread. And so as a kid, maybe this episode didn't scare me, but as an adult, I remember watching it and being like, that's one of the creepiest things ever. And it was actually the last episode. I think it's called Perfect.
Yes.
And it's when he has that quick nightmare of that CGI weird blue thing just going, you're not perfect. Like, that is the most unsettling thing to me. Like, as a kid, the scariest moment was the violin girl, where that episode where he opens the door and it's the girl with the violin. She spins around and like screams. It's all weird. As a kid, that was terrifying. As an adult, the blue thing telling me I'm not perfect, that like giving you existential dread, is the most unsettling thing on the planet. Like, yeah, I know I'm not, but what does that mean? Like, what is oh God, what does that mean about me as a human being? Like, you know, that's, and again, would you do that in a kid's show?
It really put an impact on me, and I related to Courage. He's a little dog, but I related to him so much because he loves his family, and he wants to be he wants to help people. Like, it's a strange show, but at the end of the day, when you look at the moral behind it, it's a fantastic kids show.
We talk about SpongeBob kind of being the turn for Nickelodeon, but I really think the last true to form old school Nickelodeon show that maybe is the reason this formula broke happened in the 2000s, and it's Invader Zim. Because Invader Zim, I love Invader Zim. Like, I know now Invader Zim kind of became the hot topic. You know, like everybody's got like a grr like keychain or what. Like, I get it. But like growing up when that show was airing, there was not a show like that.
No.
And it was just the pure, even Jonan Vasquez, who created the show, said when he made the movie for that they did, it was originally supposed to be on Nickelodeon, and they put on Netflix a few years ago. He said he went back and watched the show, and he was like, "Why did I make the choices I made?" Like,
because why not?
Because he was in his 20s, and he was just like, you know, screw the establishment. I'm gonna push every boundary I can.
And if you look at the comics that Jonan Vasquez was doing leading up to Invader Zim, like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac
or Squee,
they let that guy make a show for children. It's fantastic, though. Like, and I also, like, I know everyone had the Gurr thing, and I still remember how to draw Gurr, because that was, like, my thing, is, like, drawing Gurr on everything. But, again, like, it was stupid humor. It was just dumb humor, but it was weird and strange, and it pushed a lot of boundaries, like...
And the thing is that whenever they did something dark in that show, they had to fight with Nickelodeon. Yeah. And so their answer to it was always to make it even more absurd. Like, there's that episode where Gaz wants the new video game console. And there's that kid named Iggins who keeps who gets it in front of her, and he's this like really annoying kid. Well, the end of that episode is Gaz getting the after stalking him and like terrifying Iggins, she gets the game console from him, and the elevator he's in goes straight down, and like basically he's killed. Like, the elevator lands and explodes, and it's just like, you know, whatever. And Nickelodeon's like, you can't do that. Like, why? You don't see him die or anything. Like, you cannot have Gaz basically murder Iggins, you know. So they're like, okay, fine. And they went the exact opposite route, which is they made it as absurd as possible, which is the final shot of that is the shot of the elevator and Iggins punching out of it and flying in the air. Well, it says, I think it says Super Iggins on it or something, and it's just some guy going, Iggins! Like, that is Jonan Vasquez's most anarchist, like, all right, fine, screw you. We're going absurd. The episode Best Friend, where Zim steals Keith's eyes. He literally, like, that episode airs. Probably the episode I think that makes or breaks that show for people is that episode, because it's paired with Dark Harvest, which is the episode where Zim is stealing people's organs.
I was literally just gonna say, do you remember the one where he's like, I need more organs, and he just keeps like...
So you've got that episode where like intestines are like coming out of Zim's mouth because he's just full of organs. He's just stuffed with organs. And then it follows that up with Best Friend, which is the one where this very nice but like overwhelming kid named Keith wants to be Zim's friend. And so Zim, then at the end, they cut to this moment where he gives Keith this present and claws come out of it. They cut to a shadow of his eyeballs being ripped out and robotic eyes being put in his head. And he's screaming in agony the whole time. And which by the way, apparently they premiered that episode to an audience. Like it was like here's new upcoming shows. Apparently Nickelodeon chose to air that episode after they showed the audience an episode of Dora the Explorer. So that didn't go over well. But originally Nickelodeon was like standards and practices was like, you can't rip out Keith's eyes. And they go, no, you don't get it. He gets better eyes. We give him robotic better eyes. And that worked, apparently.
Why do I just picture Yonan Vasquez just sitting in a writer's chair being like, like every time they say you can't do that, he's just like, whatever.
I'm sure he was. I mean, he is a very like anti-establishment, he's kind of like
he's
punk rock. Yeah, and he hates that stuff. So again, like you said, to give that guy a kid's show, especially in his 20s, like when he's your 20s is when you're peak, like, screw the world, man, I'm fighting against everything. Like that is your 20s. And then you get into your 30s and stuff and you're like, I don't care anymore. Like,
so us.
Yeah. And so that's the thing is like, again, you bring that show for nostalgia, which is what they did with the movie. Like they brought it back, and that movie was not aimed at a new audience. That was aimed at us. That was aimed at the people who found the show or grew up with the show. Do you think there's ever a chance of any of these channels taking a risk with a show like that today? Like Invader Zim, or like Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, or any of Courage, any of those programs?
I feel like they'd be so diluted it wouldn't hit right, I feel like if they did, first off, everything would be made a lot cuter. Like Courage is cute. Don't get me wrong, he's just a little cutie, but they would have to make him a little bit cuter. They would have to make Eustace a little less mean. I feel like a lot of these, and especially Invader Zim, because again, a lot of the groundbreak. I mean, even the episode where there's the fast food restaurant, they're talking about the incredibly questionable meat that they serve. Like, I feel like they would have to be so careful about like the gross out stuff that they would do, and with Courage, like they would just censor so many things. All the edginess would just be shaved down into this nice little smooth weird baby.
And I think that's the weird thing too, is it's like I said, we do have these like creators who are trying to like not intentionally push boundaries, but just make shows like they grew up with. Yeah. But they're just not getting the same support that, other shows used to get. I mean, don't get me wrong, when Invader Zim came out, Nickelodeon did not give it a lot of support. It only has 26 episodes, I think. Like they canceled it pretty quick. But it obviously
You're done.
Yeah. But it obviously gained this huge cult following. And that's what we talked about, is it's like, I don't know if anybody would be willing to take a risk on a show or a book series like that. Like, I feel like maybe a book like Goosebumps might be easier to get out because you can self-publish now, or there's ways to get books published. But would something like that hit? I don't know. Like, I don't know if you'd get the same mass hysteria that people had over Goosebumps in that same way. Or even something like Pokemon cards, like...
I mean, I also feel like a lot of it is, like, people aren't collecting things anymore with Pokemon, but, like...
That's true.
My only complaint with Pokemon is it took that kid so damn long to become a Pokemon master. Like, if anything...
It stunted his growth. That's how long it took him.
He was malnourished from how long he had to wait to... So I found out that he finally got Pokemon Master, and I'm like, well, shit. It took Ash so long. I'm married, I'm paying taxes, and I have a furry dependent. Like, but that's my only real criticism about Pokemon. But
yeah, I mean... To get to, I guess, the heart of the question that we're asking right now is, I guess, what would it was media scarier in our day? I mean, I think maybe.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe. Again, I'm not saying there's not stuff out there. You know, we just may not be seeing it. That could be. Like, we just maybe aren't familiar with it because we're not, kids. We're adults. We're not going to be like,
I should
you know.
acquire a child so I mean, not like have one, like just find a child. There's probably a better way of saying this. Like, just do some market research on it. No, not market, really, just like find a kid.
Dig that hole.
Yeah. God. I have a friend who has made children, and I can ask her.
Excuse me. You made child, right? You made child.
You've created a human, haven't you?
Explain. Is child scared? Child scared of media? Yay,
Yes.
nay? Like,
Your spawn. How does it react to this stimuli?
if given this, scare.
Actually, no, I'm so glad that we actually started talking about this because I have a very good friend named Elsbeth, and her oldest, he's right in that preteen age where we were when we were like knee deep in this stuff.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
he is also very into scary things. Like, he's obsessed. But the thing is that the media he's consuming is our media. Like, his
Really?
favorite movie, okay, not specifically, okay, so his favorite movie is Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Okay.
Which
yeah,
is a
absolutely.
Chiodos Brothers movie from the 80s, but the thing that got him into it were video games like Five Nights at Freddy's, and I think there's one called Inky. I don't know.
Oh, Bendy, the ink machine. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. So video games, I think, might be the thing that are getting to kids now. So maybe this is still a thing. It's just transferring over to a new medium.
That's a great way to put that, because I was just about to say, once you said video games, I was like, oh my god, I didn't even think about that, which is the idea of a lot of these indie developers making these kind of, like, I won't say family friendly, but like these horror games that are not specific just to like when we were growing up, the horror games that we had, I feel like mostly it was stuff that was rated M for mature. You know what I mean? Like, it was, you had, and don't get me wrong, I played those games and they influenced me greatly, but like Resident Evil 4 or the Silent Hill games, or like all that stuff influenced me, and I love those games.
Yeah.
But they weren't aimed at me.
For kids,
They were
no.
making them like for a mature audience. But nowadays, yeah, you have games like Five Nights at Freddy's, which admittedly I used to love watching like playthroughs of and stuff, because it was so interesting when that game came out to see a game developed by somebody like that. I mean, now you've got a billion like jump scare games like that,
Right.
but like, and the lore to that game, being that there's like a child murderer and like all this like really crazy stuff. Now I feel like they've kind of walked some of that back, and it's way softer now, which is weird. It kind of goes with what we're talking about. It used to be this sort of like felt kind of punk rock, weird indie game, but now it's so big that they've retconned some of it. And it's now kind of like, well, now it's like there's, other stuff happening, and it's like, they're taking like this life force out of people and like all, and it's like, so it's not just about some guy using like a Chuck E. Cheese to like be a murderer. Like, it's not just creepy and unsettling and disturbing. It's now like softer, which I hate saying it like that, but like it feels like some of the rougher edges have been smoothed. Yeah.
The thing that got him like really invested in this was YouTube. He found a lot of this stuff through there, and now they're obviously going through some reconfiguring and stuff like that, but this kid ended up just kind of like being liked watching playthroughs of Five Nights at Freddy's, and then he just starts going down this rabbit hole and just scarier and scarier stuff. And that's when Elsbeth had to step in and start doing parental controls, as you would as a good parent.
Absolutely.
Know what your kids are consuming.
Yeah.
But show like things like Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't think it was specifically marketed towards kids. I think it was for adults, and the stuff that they have for kids is more mutable or more
Yeah.
gentler.
Well, the weird thing about Scott Cawthon, the guy that created Five Nights at Freddy's, is, and this is just who he is, like nothing, for or against it or anything. He's like a religious guy, and so when he originally was making games, he was making like Christian games, and they weren't selling, and any of the reviews were always like, your stuff looks like terrifying animatronics, like your animations and your characters look terrifying and they look like animatronics, and he went, okay, I'm going to make one more game. He was about to give up, and he's like, I'm going to make one more game. If people think my stuff looks creepy, I'm just going to make a creepy horror game then. And that's exactly what he did. It kind of like goes to show you that, like, again, just that creative, like, all right, I'm going to take this risk. There's no, he's just a one guy making this game, and it blows up. Because he took this weird risk that, based on who he was, he probably would have never made. If he had made Christian games and they had, done well or whatever, he probably just would have kept making games like that.
Yeah.
But instead he took this risk and was like, I'm going to make this horror game, use what I already have as a skill, and it just works so beautifully.
When I saw Five Nights at Freddy's when it first came out back in the dark ages, when I was watching playthroughs and stuff on YouTube, trying to figure out what the kids are doing these days,
Where are these kids? What is this YouTube that everybody's looking? Where am I? What are YouTubes? I don't have any tubes.
I don't have any tubes. What are the youth of America playing now?
They're playing with PVC pipe. All these kids, that's what they're liking. They like the YouTubes.
I remember playing that when I was a little girl. We would get a big pipe and we'd yell through it.
I had it back. It was called Yell Pipe back in my day. Now it's called YouTube. I don't.
Yell pipe. Okay, you can't make fun of Yell pipe because everyone has taken the Christmas paper roll and gone toot. Like, no, we've all done it.
Everybody's played Yell Pipe. It's true.
We're stupid.
If that's not the tagline to this show, I don't know what it is.
Quick interstitial in the beginning of the episode is just us laughing. We're stupid. But
that's a very good. I'm sorry. Go, please.
No,
Continue.
you're good. I remember watching the playthroughs of Five Nights at Freddy's on YouTube, and I thought the animation looked really good. Personally, like I was like, yeah. this is a decent, game. This for what it is. I think was it a web game or was it? I don't know if it.
No, it was just a PC
purchase?
game when it started. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
for a PC game, this is good stuff.
Yeah, for one guy making it.
One
and just
dude. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
not easy.
It's fantastic. Like I said, obviously it's blown up and it's changed a lot over the years and everything, and it's become very convoluted and weird and confusing. But that initial first couple of games, the spark of ideas for those games and just the indie attitude and the very just kind of like go for broke, I'm making a game that is accessible to all audiences but is not talking down to its audience. I think that's a big thing. If, is there content now that doesn't talk down to its audience, doesn't treat them like they're dumb because they're kids?
And kids don't like being, we just to be honest, kids don't like being treated like kids.
No, exactly. When you're a kid, you want to be an adult, and when you're an adult, all you want to be is a kid again, pretty much. It's like, it's weird how life works. About you, when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I can't wait till I can drive a car and I have whatever disposable. You would never say disposable income, but I have monies and I can buy things. But then you're an adult and you're like, God, I just wish I could sit back and watch 2 hours of programming and
You know what it is? We don't want to have our intelligence insulted. Regardless of what age we are, we don't want our intelligence to be insulted, and we want to be shown respect. And I think that what they're making today, where they're treating children like they're these soft little babies that have to be protected at all costs, and it's part of the reason why these shows are failing today, and why we're just recycling media.
And we're at this point now. Yeah, you're right. We're recycling shows. I mean, how many times have they made Transformers or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or why is SpongeBob still going, or like, you know, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with people working on these shows. Like,
Oh no, we want you to have a job.
yes, please, like, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you can get a job on SpongeBob and you grew up with SpongeBob, great, enjoy it, like, have fun.
Fantastic.
But it is this thing of like, how much is too much of this, like, bringing back old media, and why is it so hard to give this current generation their own identity, their own shows, their own stuff that gets under their skin and scares them when they're sitting there reading, you know, yeah, there's still Goosebumps books, like I said, and that's great. So maybe there are still kids out there who are like reading, and like, do kids read? Like, do kids read anymore is a good question.
Kids, do you read? Children, are you reading? Is that...
Like, and that's why I never understood why parents got upset over that stuff. Your kid is reading.
Be happy.
Be happy about that. Why isn't that awesome? Like, bring it all back. You talked about that episode of Ghastly Grinner of Are You Afraid of the Dark? The reason that whole episode gets started is because that comic book he's reading about the Ghastly Grinner, the teacher gets angry he's reading a comic book in class and throws it in a fish tank. And so he has to like microwave it, and that's what brings the Ghastly Grinner back to life. Whatever. Doesn't matter. But the idea of a teacher being so angry that a student is reading
Yeah.
would never happen today. Like,
I was that kid. I read in class, and I've always ever had a teacher say, first off, I read in class because, girl, I had ADD. And, but they never yelled at me. They were like, you know, hey, I'm glad you're reading, but, you know, it'd be really important if you paid attention to this lesson.
Right.
And I'd be like, yeah, but here's the thing. I'm one of those overachieving ADD kids where I can procrastinate until the last second and then pull an A out at the end. And also, you're teaching me something I already know. Not always, but I read because I was bored. If I didn't already know, like, I already knew what was going on, so of course I'm going to start reading. So like, I think in some cases as I started to get older, teachers just stopped stopping me from reading. Like, they just let me go and do my thing. And if my grades started to suffer, then maybe they talked to me, but none of them ever did because it never happened.
right. Exactly. And,
Slight brag. Slight brag there.
It's a very fascinating thing. And maybe when we don't have I don't think we were going to figure out the answer to this, you know, by the end of this episode, like whether media was scarier when we grew up, you know, and I don't even know if we really even addressed that question. But
I think at the end of the day, we did kind of get to it where it's like, it was scarier. I mean, of course we would say that, but
we have a bias. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
we have a bias for when we grew up, but
yeah, trying to put that bias aside, like really looking at the difference between what I'm seeing produced today and what I saw back when I was a kid. There's a lot of things that was allowed when we were kids that would never be allowed on television or art. I mean, these are books that they were trying to get banned when we were kids. I can't imagine them trying to keep these books going in school libraries today. Yeah. And I'm telling you, as a kid, we wanted this stuff. Like, and I'm sure if you ask kids today, they'd probably say, I want this stuff.
I watched a video recently, and I wish I could remember what it was, but they broke this down, and they basically kind of said that younger generations are fascinated and picking things from older generations, but they want to do it better. So they want to fix the mistakes of older generations, but they want to keep what they like. Yeah. So things that maybe aren't as inclusive or things like that, that's out. But if you got the sweet, awesome music record, or if you've got a record player, or you've got, you know, old VHS copies of, you know, Nickelodeon shows or things like that, like they're responding to that old media. They just want it to be better. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that's an awesome thing, that they're not rejecting what is old. They're accepting it and wanting to make the world a better place because of that. So,
and that's all that we want. You know, that's all that anyone should want for their kids. And I think thanks to artists like Post Malone, who did a collaboration with Ozzy Osbourne, now we have a whole generation of kids who never heard of Ozzy Osbourne, who are now discovering Black Sabbath and Ozzy, and they're like, this is dope. Like, this is really cool. Yeah. And what we want and what anyone should want is to just see progress, not just in creativity and in art, but we want to see progress for the future generations, and we want to see them becoming, you know, more actualized versions of who they are.
Yeah. Again, I think that all kind of comes back to this media, which is the idea that a lot of this media, even if parents at the time didn't understand it, It was there to give kids a safe place to experience something a little bit creepy and a little bit safe at the same time. It was a way to escape minor or major troubles in your life, a way to look at something and explore something that maybe gave you a little bit of an escape or a little bit of something fun and something a little bit different, a little bit edgy, a little bit, quote unquote unsafe, felt unsafe, even though it wasn't, to give you that kind of like experience of fear and also give you a safe place to explore those emotions and develop those emotions. There's a lot of people out there that don't get that opportunity, and like being able to be in touch with like your emotions and understand what scares you, what doesn't, so you have a safe way to explore that is very positive, and a very helpful thing. And so hopefully we can return back to a state, if we haven't already, where people, younger kids or older people, can explore those emotions that we like to refer to as negative emotions, but really
we can explore
aren't.
them and confront them in a healthy way.
It's a great way to find somebody to connect with, was the media we grew up with. You know what I mean? Like, you could find somebody. Back then, not everybody had seen Evil Dead 2, or not everybody had seen, watched Are You Afraid of the Dark? And so it was something like when you found somebody who also watched that, it was like, oh,
Yes.
I connect with you. You get me. I understand, and it was not a way to form cliques. That's not what I want. I'm not saying like it was a way to divide people, but it was a way to bring people together.
Precisely.
And now everybody watches everything at the same time, and then everybody digests it and it goes away. Things just don't have the same staying power. And maybe that's why we don't recognize the same media either, for younger generations, is things just don't seem to have the same staying power. Like you
gotta hold people's attention.
Yeah.
The other show that I wanted to bring up, tell me if you've heard of this, Bone Chillers.
Is that on Netflix? Oh,
No.
wait, no, you're talking about, I know Bone Chillers. You're talking about, it was a 90s show based on another kind of sort of Goosebumps book series that only ran for so many episodes. Yes, because the reason, I'm so glad you brought this up. For years, I had memories of this show, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Yes.
Anywhere.
Yeah, I remember renting the VHS and watching them and things like that, but I could not figure out what it was until recently. I stumbled upon it and went, that is it. That is the thing I've been looking for, is Bone Chillers.
Bone Chillers. Okay, listen, if you had anything to do with Bone Chillers, please
let us know.
Please
we would love to talk to you.
Please bring that back. When I was a kid, I just want to take a quick shout out to the Ohio Public Library System, because that show had a very limited release. Like you said, it was only on VHS. It never got released onto DVD. Right now, if you want to watch an episode of this show, you have to go on YouTube. It's the only place you can find it. And I've been binge watching it for the past few days. Like, it's so good. I was online Googling when you're like trying to find a show and you're just Googling like the weirdest shit possible.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I'm Googling like scary show, teens, high school, giant turkey mustard. That was the episode that it clinged to my head so much. And I'm like, giant turkey mustard. And I finally found it and I was so happy. But my dad found this show through our local public library and he's like, yeah, it looked scary, so I thought you would like it. So he showed it to me and I was obsessed. This show is so much fun. It's goofy, it's funny in all the best ways for a kid. Like the jokes. My favorite character was not the lunch lady, but the lunch man. He was so the jokes with that guy were legitimately like laugh out loud funny. And the monsters were really good too. It had really good special effects. The monsters were creepy. I mean, the one of the episodes that also stuck out to me was actually the first episode, the pilot, where anything that they draw in this notebook comes to life, and there is this creepy thing that just crawled on all fours and chased you, and it was like wrinkly humanoid thing. It was nasty.
You know what? I've decided. This is what I think. I think we're gonna do. We're gonna review the pilot episode of Bone Chillers, because no one is going to talk about that show other than us. All right. Like people are out there talking about, you got like Big Orange Couch, and I think it's Splat Attack podcast. You got people talking about Nickelodeon and Are You Afraid of the Dark? You got those podcasts. I'm sure there's a Goosebumps podcast. Nobody's talking about Bone Chillers. So we're gonna do an episode of Twice the Terror, and we're gonna do an episode review on the pilot episode of Bone Chillers coming up soon.
This is the content you came to Twice the Terror for. It was so stupid, and I loved it. The actors were great. It had Linda Cardellini in it.
Oh, that's right. I forgot she was in that.
Yeah, she was such a fun character. Like, and all the characters are also, the actors are very funny. Again, teen actors, I want to say, or like, young adults, but they were funny and unique, and they gave great delivery, and it wasn't insulting to your intelligence, but at the same time, it knew when to like not take itself too seriously.
That's it. We're going to sporadically, in between us talking about Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, ghosts, and horror movies, we're going to do episode reviews of Bone Chillers.
Yeah.
So we're going to just, every once in a while, when we're like, you know what, we haven't watched a Bone Chillers in a while, we're going to do an episode of Bone Chillers, and we're going to review them. So be prepared.
I'm glad someone else had heard of this, because I was pretty sure that I was like having a fever dream or something, and I thought
I felt like that for years. I'm like, what the hell was this show? I don't remember.
The only one. And yeah, I found it, and I was ecstatic too that I even found the episodes. And I was watching it, and I just forgot how much I loved these characters. I loved the gross out humor that they did in a lot of, like, there's the one episode where the teacher turns into a frog, and he eats these,
I remember that one.
He eats these frog eggs. It's so I actually gagged. I'm an adult and I'm watching it. I'm gagging, but I'm loving it.
I think for now that's gonna do it for this episode. Kat, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, haunt us on all the social medias. We are on the TikTok and the Instagram under Twice the Terror, as well as if you are listening to us on Spotify, you can also watch us on YouTube. You can see the moments where I am utterly losing my mind. I say for this episode, I declare this meeting of the Midnight Society officially closed.
Well, until next time, everybody.
Bye.